Welcome to the MARPE Diplo Project. This is a European research programme developing a new body of knowledge which links communications and diplomacy and seeks to build a new interdisciplinary knowledge community, which is also an epistemic community. The MARPE Diplo Project is an Erasmus Plus strategic partnership carried out by 5 European higher education institutions from France, Belgium, Portugal, Spain, and Romania. Together, from 2018 to 2021, we have developed an academic project exploring public diplomacy, organisational diplomacy, and civil society diplomacy from a communication perspective. To understand how we approach these 3 dimensions, let's take a look at the why, the how, and the what. Let's start with the why. 10 years ago, we had a first Erasmus project, bringing together students and academics, researchers and practitioners, reflecting on public relations, government affairs and lobbying in a European perspective. We concluded we had worked on communication instruments for 3 years, and we were ready now to explore communications at a more strategic level. We did so from 3 complementary perspectives: a European one, a communication or public relations one, and a diplomatic perspective. We identified that European institutions are driven by power, although aiming for consensus with stakeholders. We recognised that overall, the EU is still building its European narrative. This highlighted the importance of a society-driven perspective, focusing on the citizens. Such a strategy does not always have an EU-centric approach. Fundamental to these perspectives is the importance of an ethical framework underpinning organisations and their communications. Ethics should be at the core of communications and public relations when dealing, for instance, with organisations and their engagement with public policy and elected representatives. The project brought us a strategic stance going beyond an instrumental approach to communications. Considering that the European perspective on public relations focuses on publics and the public interest, we adopted the same society-driven approach. When analysing EU communication strategies, we analysed the representation and negotiation functions, linking diplomacy and public relations. When looking at the intersection of diplomacy and public relations, we could see the shared practices of both diplomacy and public relations in terms of representation, negotiation, advocacy, and dialogue. All of them nurtured by monitoring and intelligence. Mirroring the focus on citizens and publics mentioned in the European and the communication perspectives, we considered adding a comparable focus to diplomacy. This led us to the concept of public diplomacy, shaping the public opinion of third parties. To sum up our project, we identified 3 pillars: Public diplomacy is a direct result of the intersection of public relations and diplomacy. We consider public diplomacy as the contribution of a public relations way of thinking to diplomacy. Initially, we considered the term corporate diplomacy as the second pillar of our research. However, the public sphere has non-state actors such as NGO as well as companies. This is why we decided to move from corporate diplomacy to organisational diplomacy. We consider organisational diplomacy as the contribution of a diplomatic way of thinking to public relations. We also had a conceptual move from civic diplomacy towards civil society diplomacy, as the latter is not only reflecting a public-centric, but in essence, a society-driven perspective. We consider civil society diplomacy as a combination of PR and diplomacy, driven by the actors of the public sphere. After the why, let's go into how the project emerged. The MARPE Diplo Project was carried out by the MARPE Network, an initiative that goes back to the 1980s, long before Erasmus was a fact, nurtured by a long-term vision that is rooted in education and research. How is it that after more than 30 years, we're still bonding and reflecting on some challenging questions? One quick answer: respect, trust, and understanding. Let me explain. Respect for each other's specific area of expertise. Trust in our capacity to face all challenges together, built on the trust that we will be there together at the rendezvous, no matter what. Understanding our cultural differences, accommodating our sometimes very different work rhythms in a MARPE way of working. However, trust, respect, and understanding can sometimes be challenging, but we always manage to stay on those tracks, applying what we preach in communication, and the MARPE colleagues are friends. The way we structured the MARPE Diplo project introduced some innovative elements. Co-creation was a key building block. This meant academics constructed a body of knowledge and built an epistemic or knowledge community together with students, practitioners, and supported by associated partners. This resulted in content and project outcomes which are based on a combination of out-of-the-box thinking and research-driven reflection. And last but not least, the project integrated a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary approach, combining research and practice from communication sciences, international relations, political science, law, strategic studies, pedagogy, management, and business. What does this mean in terms of outputs? We organised an intensive study programme bringing together 42 participants from 12 nationalities, representing the 5 strategic partners and 1 associated partner. One of the core objectives of the MARPE Diplo Intensive Study Programme, constructed for and with the students, was to expose students to the experience and expertise of lecturers and professionals from a variety of fields. This enabled our budding epistemic community to explore and explain the complexity of the intersection between strategic communication, public diplomacy, organisational diplomacy, and civil society diplomacy. We organised 5 MARPE Diplo talks in Ghent, Valencia, Bucharest, Lisbon, and again in Bucharest, bringing together academics, students and practitioners on topics related to public, organisational and civil society diplomacy, not forgetting communication, pedagogy and research. To engage the academic community around the core concepts of the project, we also organised an online international conference in Lisbon. We addressed 4 large topics: hard and soft power, the evolution of public diplomacy, organisational diplomacy, and global common goods and the role of citizens in diplomacy. And we welcomed online participants from all continents. And to top it all off, we published a book, Diplomacy, Organisations, Citizens, a European Communication Perspective, with explorations, case studies and best practices to transfer our MARPE Diplo content in training programs, both academic and professional. We hope you've enjoyed this journey through the 3 years of the MARPE Diplo Project. If you want to know more, be part of our MARPE epistemic community, visit our website and subscribe to our newsletter. And don't hesitate to contact us. We are always open to new ideas. See you soon in the MARPE network.